Hey y'all, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to discuss the differences between 2009 and up model year 4L60Es and those that were produced in prior years, so basically 1993 through 2008. Alright, so there's one overarching takeaway that you need to know from this video. So if you don't watch beyond this point, that's perfectly fine, because the rest of it is just going to be contextual detail and anecdotal supporting what I'm about to say. And what I'm going to say is this, alright, this is the main thing you need to know here. There is nothing about the 2009 and up model year 4L60Es that will make them compatible as an entire assembled transmission with any vehicle manufactured between 1993 and 2008 that took a 4L60E. Okay, nothing. There's no adaptation that you can do. There's no workarounds to allow for the swapping of an 09 and up model year unit into a 2008 and back, and likewise there's nothing you could really do to integrate a 2008 and rearward model year 4L60E into a 2009 and up vehicle. They are completely different, and the main reason for this has to do with the command and control component changes that took place for the 09 model year. All right, the most significant of those is being the introduction of the internal mode switch. All right, the internal mode switch takes the place of the manual lever position sensor and pressure switch manifold assembly, and basically does the same job that it took those two components to do combined. And that job is to communicate transmission range position to the powertrain control module, okay, or PCM. All right, now when we say range position, all right, what does that mean? Now if you're familiar with this, obviously you know, but if you're not, range position just simply means the position that you have selected in, when you're driving the vehicle on the shifter, whether it be a column shifter, whether it be a floor shifter, either from park, reverse, neutral, drive, 3, 2, or 1. Okay, those are all examples of ranges. So what the internal mode switch does is it communicates what position you've selected on your gear shifter to the PCM so that the PCM knows what it must do to command the transmission and tell it what to do and when to shift and how to shift and all that good stuff. So that's an integral part of the function and management of the 4L60E, and so that one change necessitated a whole host of component changes and component engineering and manufacturing changes to support this new capability. All right, so what I'll do is I'll start with the case. We'll compare an 09 and up case to a earlier case, and then we'll move to the individual parts, if you will. There I'll start with the electronic stuff, and then we'll move to the valve body and the spacer plates, and then we'll kind of wrap up. So like I said, the overarching takeaway is the two generations of 4L60E are not interchangeable. I mean, you can adapt, say, a 97 to 96 to work in a 93, 94, 95 model year unit. I mean, it's fairly extensive, but you can do it. Okay, you can adapt a 01 to 05 to work in a 96 to 2000. Again, the adaptation is fairly extensive, but you can do it. You can't adapt an 09 and up model year unit to work with an 08 and back. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the particulars, and we'll walk you through what those differences are, so at least if nothing else, you know what they are, and you know how to avoid making a mistake, when it comes to looking for 4L60Es, especially those that are looking for stopgap replacements, good used units, as opposed to having their pre-existing transmission rebuilt. All right, so here on the left we have a 2003 model year unit, and then on the right we have an 09 and up unit. This is a 2010 4L60E out of a Chevy Colorado. This one is out of either a Tahoe or Yukon with a 5.3 liter in it. So the bell housings are different, but that's not important. I mean, you can swap bell housings in between different units, whatever. All right, the main differences here for the 09 and up model year unit are going to be in the worm tracks. Okay, so they're largely the same except for a few areas. So on the earlier units, you'll notice in this area here, okay, this is going to be in the general neighborhood of the valve body where the detent roller is. Okay, this transmission, the 2009 and up model year unit, has this little partition or cavity here that looks distinctly different than the one over here. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what each of these circuits do and how they relate to each other in terms of the differences and the effects that has. Just simply pointing out the visual differences or changes so that you're aware of them and you know how to spot them. All right, and then in here there's some like partitioning walls halfway up the casting up to the deck surface. In here there are no such walls. All right, and then up in this area over here, you'll notice we have kind of a I don't know, like a stepped partition, and then you have a wall here. All right, in the 2009 and up unit, there's nothing like that. Okay, and same here, we have a partition wall in the the 03 case, and we just have a square cutout here. All right. All right, the rest of the bolt hole locations, if you study and compare them, they're the same. Okay, I don't see any obvious differences between the bolt hole locations and the bolt pattern for the valve body, spacer plate, and case between these two units. All right. Now, this is the internal mode switch. Okay, this is going to be the main driver behind all these differences. So the IMS comes as an integrated rooster comb and sensor assembly. All right, you buy it new from GM, and if you're overhauling your transmission, you always install a new internal mode switch. And this is true for all transmissions that take them, or range position sensor, or whatever equivalent at whatever transmission you're working on. Okay, all the modern units, or at least most of them, they've moved the range position sensor into the interior of the unit. All right, it's no longer on the exterior like where the manual lever position would go if this was a 2008 and back unit. Okay, so it kind of makes serviceability a little bit more cumbersome. You got to drop the pan or drain the fluid, and maybe that could get messy if you don't have a drain plug. So if you're running an 09 and up case or 09 and up vehicle, I would strongly recommend you swap out the factory pan if it doesn't have a drain plug and put one in there that has a drain plug, because if you need to change this out, it's a whole lot cleaner and a lot less slippery, if you will, for you if you have a drain plug and get rid of the fluid. So this is the mode switch, and how it works is as you change range position from park to reverse to neutral, drive, 3, 2, 1, all right, this thing moves. Okay, it moves along the rooster comb with your detent roller. Okay, the detent roller goes right here in this cutout, and so that will send a communication to the PCM informing the powertrain control module what range you've selected. That's basically how it works. All right, the pressure switch manifold assembly worked with the manual lever position sensor to do that, and in the 93 through early 95 units, the neutral safety switch worked in combination with the pressure switch manifold assembly to accomplish the same task. So that's basically it. All right. The other difference that I'll make mention of on cases, and this is, I've noticed this, so I don't know if it's universal or not, but if you look down here, and I'll just flash a picture because it's going to be impossible to zoom in, but if you look down here on this portion of the case at the very rear on the bottom, okay, on the two-piece case designs anyway, there's going to be laser engraving with some letters and numbers. It's an alphanumeric date code, okay? The first 4 characters, it's going to be a number and 3 letters, match what's on the date stamp that's on the top of the transmission case. In the 09 and up units, they seem to have eliminated that. All right, this is completely blank. There's nothing there. All right, so if you're looking at the unit from the outside, it doesn't have a manual lever position sensor, but it does have an elongated selector shaft, and it does have the provisions for bolting an MLPS to the side. But this is completely missing any sort of engraving. Then if the sticker on the top of the case is missing, you might be led to believe that this is an 09 and up unit. Now I would just assume, for the sake of being cautious, that it is. Okay, because I've not seen any laser engravings here on the 09 and up units, and I don't do them as much as the other stuff, but from what I've seen, it's missing on all of them that I have personally worked on. All right, I'm going to reposition the camera, then we'll go to the bench where we have all the other parts. This is really all I wanted to mention about the case. Other than that, like I said, they appear to be largely the same, and the internal case architecture is the same too. Like the parts, there's no material differences in terms of the parts. You can retro parts out of a 2013 4L60E, like the gear sets, or you know, if you wanted to, the drums. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do that all the way back to an 82 700 R4. Okay, but the key differences are those that I pointed out. And then the selector is also different in the 09 and up units. It's got flats here on the inner portion of the shaft that the 08 and back selector shafts do not have, and it also has a location to secure the roll pin or drive the roll pin through and through, so you can secure the internal mode switch to the shaft itself. All right. So that's cases. Let's move to the bench. So let's take a closer look at some of these component differences. So I'm going to start actually in here where we have manual lever position sensor, pressure switch manifold assembly, and the internal mode switch. So like I've been mentioning, these two components join forces to communicate range position to the PCM based on driver selection in the shifter inside the vehicle. The internal mode switch replaced these two components in 2009, and this is what communicates range position, and it does all of the same functions that this and this did together. So GM wanted to streamline that portion of the operation, and they also began installing mode switches in their 6L transmissions right out the gate in 2006. So there was obviously some, I guess, evolutionary engineering pressures to do the same for the 4L60. Now, to my knowledge, they did not do this with the 4L80s, and so you know, maybe they just saw a better cost-benefit proposition to make this change for the 4L60Es. Okay, now the manual lever position sensor began to install onto 4L60Es, I believe, in late '95, and the '95 through 2003 model year units came with a 2-connector MLPS. So there was a connector here and a connector there. One of these connectors was for park, the other was for neutral. So if you have a no crank, no start condition and you ruled out any kind of issues with your battery or your starting or charging system, like the starter or the alternator or whatever, and all your accessory lights work and all of your you know, radio and other stuff like that that runs off battery power still function, but you just have absolutely no crank, no start, is dead, throw the thing in neutral. Okay, this is assuming you're having this problem in park. Put it in neutral and try again. In the 95 through 03 units, it's possible that the park connector failed, but the neutral connector was still communicating information. All right. Now I don't know if you can do that with the with the 04 and up MLPSs, with the you know, 04 and up model year vehicles, or I guess I should say 04 through 08. I believe that once they went to the single combined connector, that if either park or neutral goes bad, if this thing goes bad at all, then you're not going to have any ability to start the vehicle. But I know for a fact, for the 95 to 2003 model year, if only the park channel is bad, you know, the park connector, but the neutral channel is still working, then you'll be able to start your car in neutral. Okay. All right, 09 and up, here is the mode switch. Here's a close-up view of it. Okay, like I said, this is the mode switch position in, with the detent roller here in park. And then as you cycle through the gears, this will cycle through its little detents. Okay, so here are all the different surfaces and conductor strips or whatever that will communicate range position. All right, and it just simply, you know, rotates on the selector shaft, and that's it. So if that goes bad, you'll have a no crank, no start condition, and you'll have to replace the mode switch to get it back, or somehow bypass, you know, this aspect of the starting cycle so that you can jump the starter and get it going. And if you're out somewhere, you know, either shopping or running errands, or, you know, even worse, like somewhere in the backcountry off-roading, you may have to do that to get home. Okay, if you can't call a tow truck. All right, so these are the two primary components here at play that necessitated changes to the harnesses and to the valve bodies. So this is going to be a late 90s harness, somewhere 96 to 2000 would be my guess, or 2002 rather. 1996 through 2002, the electronic pressure control solenoid had a two-prong connector like this. In 03 and up, they went to a more traditional looking connector that looks more like this. All right. Other than that, there's no real change. I mean, the continuity values or resistance, you know, when you check the EPC on a, you know, DVOM is going to be the same. In 1993 through 94, there was no connection for the PWM solenoid. In 95, they introduced PWM, and so you had two connectors on this side. All right. For 2007, or maybe late 2006, they integrated a turbine speed sensor into the 4L60E, so you would have something that looks like this, but on otherwise a harness that looks like this, but with a more traditional connector for the electronic pressure control solenoid. Okay, and then another way you can quickly at a glance tell differences is the color here of the inner portion of the case connector itself. You'll notice on the very late model, it's got kind of a beigeish inner portion or inner diameter with a blue surface for the pins. This is all green, and then the rest of the exterior is gray. I mean, that's universal, but look for the color changes here. And I want to say 1995 might have been like purple or pink. 1993, 94, maybe 95 was green. I know for a fact I remember seeing a pink or purple colored harness. That might have been an aftermarket, but generally speaking, if you see this, okay, this green color, it's going to be a pre-input speed sensor harness. They changed that color when they went to the ISS sometime in late 2006, or maybe it was mid 2006. All right, let me show you now the harness for an 09 and up. All right, so you obviously have your case connector, but look at your pin counts. Your pin counts are going to be different as well. Okay, you see the difference there? Get that close up so you can actually see into the connector and the face of it. You see the pin counts, they're different. Okay, if I find a diagram for each of the respective pin counts for the major vintages of wiring harness, I'll flash them across the screen so you can take a picture of it or grab a screenshot. But visual differences are going to be the color first and foremost, if you're just looking to see if something has an ISS or not, and then pin counts if you need to look more granularly. All right, now here is the connector for the mode switch. Okay, as you can see, nothing like this exists on this late 90s or early 2000s harness. Okay, you have your turbine speed sensor here, and then this is going to be your temperature sensor, because the temperature sensor was previously on the internal, or excuse me, the manual lever position sensor, but that got eliminated when the, the pressure switch manifold, pressure switch manifold assembly. Okay, this is the temperature sensor. Pressure switch manifold, internal mode switch, manual lever position sensor, transmission digital range sensor. So, sorry, I'm getting crossed up. But this is your trans temperature sensor on these 09 and up units. All right, and then the rest of the harness is otherwise largely the same. You have your torque converter clutch lockup solenoid, and then you have your PWM connector, but you'll notice there's no 3-2 control solenoid connector because that got eliminated starting in 2009 as well. Okay, that was the other major change that I didn't mention up until now, but you probably already knew that anyway. All right, let me go ahead and clear these electrical components to the side, and then we'll put the two valve bodies front and center. We'll just quickly walk through the differences there, and then we'll finish up with the spacer plates, and I'll show you 4 different generations or 4 different vintages of plate so that you can see what the differences are there if you're not sure of how to distinguish, one from the other. When it comes to 4L60E valve bodies, and this is true of most GM transmissions, at least where the valve body is aluminum, the easiest, most reliable, and quickest way to tell what year this valve body was manufactured in is going to be on the casting itself right here in this location. Okay, this is a 1997 valve body. and then this is going to be a 2010 valve body. Alright, so right away you should notice immediate major differences visually between these two castings. Okay, so we have our 97 here. 96 through 2006 are largely the same. Okay, there was some minor changes to the PWM valving in there between I want to say 2000 and 2001. They made some subtle tweaks to try to cut down on the P1870 issues that are notorious for 95 through 2000. But you can take a 01 valve body and put it in a 96 and it'll work. And likewise, you can take a 97, stick it on an 03 and it'll work fine. Okay, even I mean, you can even install these, as far as I know, into the 07 and 08 units, and they'll still work, though you may have to do a little bit of adaptation. But the main differences between these two castings is going to be the elimination of the 3-2 control solenoid and associated valve, the 3-2 control valve and spring, and the provisions for bolting the pressure switch manifold. So here's the pressure switch manifold location on all of the earlier valve bodies pre-2009. Okay, just goes like this, just sits right over there, and all your little pressure switches are going to be you know, settling right in over here. Okay, so fluid will come up whenever the manual valve is moved from range position to range position, and each one of these pressure switches becomes energized, and that, you know, gets translated by the PCM into a range position. Okay, it uses that information plus the input information from the manual lever position sensor to determine what has been selected on the gear shifter. Okay, 09 and up, there's nothing over here like that. Okay, you cannot mount the pressure switch manifold because there's no place to really mount it to. There's no ports, no pressure ports like there is over here. Okay, the other thing is the 3-2 control solenoid location has been completely casted over. Okay, it's just a little cavity there with nothing in it. I mean, it's blank, there's nothing there. Okay, just a little inset, and that's it. Okay, manual valves are the same, and the rest of the valve trains are largely the same. Alright, 04 and up, the torque converter clutch regulator valve and isolator valves are the same. So if you have a problem with this valve train, so either the regulator or isolator, inboard or outboard, are not sealing adequately, which is common in all 4L60Es starting in 95. It's less common with the later models than it is from that 95 to 2000 period, but it still happens, and this valve body in particular is very weak there. And I'll have a separate video on how we fix this, and you know, you'll get to see that. But bottom line is that the design change itself were minimal after 2004. So other changes that I can think of offhand when it comes to the valving, I actually don't think there are any other changes. I think this was really it, and again, it's attributed to 04 and up. This is the TCC valve, not this. This is going to be your 3-2 downshift valve and your reverse abuse valve. This is going to be your 3-4 upshift valve. This is going to be your 3-4 relay and 4-3 sequence valve, and then this is your torque converter clutch regulator and isolator valve. So I apologize. That's it. PWM solenoid is the same. 96 all the way up through end of production 2013. Shift solenoids are the same. The EPC is the same in terms of its resistance or impedance and the frequency that it functions. The connector is the only thing that really changed. They were using Borg Warner as a supplier. I think they have since moved to Bosch starting in 2003. And the 4L80s followed either in 02 or 04. I'm not exactly sure which is. I'll annotate the video. Other than that, that's basically it. I mean, we can flip the valve bodies over. You can just do a quick visual comparison between worm tracks. All right, the check ball locations, they're all the same configuration. Each valve body will take 7 check balls. That is true for all 1993 through 2013. 20 years of valve bodies, the check ball configurations never changed. So I'm just doing a quick comparison. Manual valve looks the same. Here is the TCC. This is where you test it for, you know, if you have a Sonic's vac test machine. You've seen that in other videos. This is where you'll test it. The actuator feed limit valve. This is the test location here. Right there. Okay. For the 3.2 is going to be where you have your biggest differences. As you can see, it's casted over. There's nothing really there on the underside. Okay, this valve body cannot be moved or swapped into an 08 and back 4L60E. It'll never work. And then likewise, you cannot swap this into an 09 and up. All right, now I'm going to touch on spacer plates. I don't want to spend too much time, but at the same token, I don't want to just gloss over it. So I will show you how to identify different vintages of spacer plates visually by pointing out the key differences between them all. So I have all spacer plates, at least representative of all the vintages from 1993 up through into production 2013. So it's basically 20 years worth of spacer plates sitting here on the bench. So this one here is going to be our 93, 94 model year units. This spacer plate will work only on those years. Okay, and right over here is where you can visually tell if you're looking at a 93 or 94 plate or something 95 and up. So if you notice, in this area, there's pretty much nothing here other than this little TCC balance hole. But on all other plates, you see your PWM orificing. Okay, so nothing here, like this rectangular and circular cutout, means you're looking at a 93 or 94 spacer plate, and anything between those 2 years directly interchangeable, either in part or in in terms of the entire transmission. So if you have a 94 went bad, you could put a 93 in and it'll work fine. Okay, this next one here is going to be 95, and how you can distinguish a 95 spacer plate from all other years is this area right here. Okay, so this is going to be a 96 through 2000 spacer plate. It's actually a 99, and you'll notice there's no hole in this location or a rectangular cutout like there is in this location here. 95 was the first year PWM. And then starting in 96, they made wholesale engineering changes to the PWM apply circuit, so that necessitated changes to the pump, the valve body, and the spacer plate. And I think technically the wiring harness, though the harnesses now will work in any years 93 through 02. But those other 3 hard parts, so to speak, they did change, and that's what makes 95 a standalone year for 4L60Es. All right, now starting in 2001, they made another change to the spacer plate relative to the 96 through 2000, and visually you can look in this area right in here. You'll notice that there's a 3-character stamp when prior years only had a 2-character stamp, and then there's also a hole right here that doesn't exist on the previous vintage's spacer plate. Okay, so this is basically the 90s up through 2006. Okay, now 2007, 2008 had some subtle changes as well. Unfortunately, I don't actually have a representative plate for those years, so I guess I lied when I said I had all years. I don't for 07, 08. There is some changes such that when you go to buy an aftermarket plate, such as Transgo's plates, they do have a different part number for the 2007 and 2008 model year than they do for the 1996 through 2006 range. Okay, so this is what we're looking at right here. This is a Transgo 4696 plate, and that will cover you from 1996 through 2006, and it will work just fine. So if you're not sure and you have like a 99 spacer plate, but you have like an 01 and up transmission and valve body, and for whatever reason this is the only thing that you have available to you, and you can't get a transgo plate in for whatever friggin' reason, maybe you're not in the United States and maybe the supply chain where you're at isn't nearly as robust, and it's not just a matter of placing an order on Amazon or going to your hard part supplier. You can run a 99 plate. You just want to make sure that you run your 93 through 2000 valve body spacer plate gasket set. So you have two gaskets, the gasket that goes onto the case between it and the plate, and then the gasket that goes between the plate and the valve body. All right, now we'll talk about the 2009 and up model year spacer plate. And the biggest difference visually is going to be, well, I guess two things. One, the bonded gaskets, that started I think in 2007 or 2008. And then secondly, this area over here is different. Okay, there's a hole here that does not exist in the earlier vintages. So that spacer plate, like I said, I don't want to boil the ocean. I mean, there's not really a whole lot to say beyond that. You just want to make sure that you use a spacer plate that is compatible with your model year 4L60E that you're working on if you have to replace the one that's in there. Now, unless the spacer plate is destroyed in some way, and we see this in water contamination scenarios where it's just literally rusted out, you could repair the plates, okay? And it doesn't matter what year it is, whether it has bonded gaskets or not. And the most common problem is going to be wear right here for the 1-2 check ball location. Okay, 1-2 check ball location is notorious for having the ball eventually wear into the plate and get stuck there. And when that happens, you're going to have like late, very harsh bang 1-2 shifts and other related drivability symptoms associated with the 1-2 and 2-1 transition. Okay, Fitzall makes a quick repair kit, and I have a separate video on it that you can check out. I'll link it in the description, that you can check out, and I'll show you exactly how to repair these plates so that you can reuse them. And the kit itself comes with, I want to say, 5 repair sleeves and 5 retainer clips, and it's something like $10, and that's it. Or you can buy the Transgo kit, the Transgo plate for about 20 or 25 bucks. All right, in this closing section, I'm just going to kind of summarize all of which I covered so far and just give you a quick rundown of all the 4L60E vintages, their defining characteristics, as well as interchange rules so you know what you're dealing with. All right, so don't worry if you can't read any of this chicken scratch. I'm going to go ahead and verbally run through it with you so that you know exactly what's going on. Okay, so here are all the different vintages for 4L60Es. All right, you got a total of 6 of them, at least 6 that I recognize. So 1993-94, okay, that's going to be the first 2 years of the transmission's lifespan, if you will. And the defining characteristic here is that there is no pulse width modulated torque converter clutch apply strategy. GM originally planned on introducing the 4L60E right out of the gate with PWM, but for whatever reason, the technology or the system wasn't matured yet. It wasn't ready, so they had to put it off until 95. Unlike the 4L80Es, they were PWM right out of the gate starting in 91. So these 2 years will interchange with each other, no problem. So if you have a 93 model year vehicle that has a 4L60E in it and your transmission goes bad, you can find any 93 or 94, it'll swap right in. Assuming the transmission itself is healthy, it'll work just fine. No kind of adaptation or reprogramming or any of that stuff needed. All right, and this is just a side note for builders. The 93-94 pump bodies will retro back to at least 1988 for 700 R4s. So if you're in a pinch, you can't find a 732 pump body, you can use the pump body out of a 93 or 94 4L60E. And I'll flash the last 3 digits of the casting number on these on the screen. I don't have them memorized, but I know that because I've done it numerous times. Alright, so after 1994, GM was finally ready to introduce pulse width modulation into the torque converter clutch apply strategy. And so 95 was the first year of PWM. So all the pump bodies are going to be stamped or cast with the letters PWM in the front of them, so you can't mistake them for a pump body for a 93 or 94 model year unit. All right. Also, they introduced the manual lever position sensor late in 95, or for a mid-year change, and this was also the last year of the first design 3-2 control solenoid and valving that was in the valve body. Okay, so 95 is a standalone year. Now, you can adapt a 1995 model year unit to work in a 93-94. You just simply have to replace the valve body, the spacer plate, and the you would delete your PWM solenoid. Okay, and that's basically it. The worm tracks in the case, or the case design itself, the hydraulic circuitry itself, did not change at all. The changes were made to the pump, the valve body, and the spacer plate, and that is it. So you just need to make those parts swap, and you can make it work in a 93 or 94. Wiring harness also is different. However, don't despair. Just purchase Rostra's harness for 1993 through 2002 model year 4L60Es, and it'll plug and play no problem. All right. Starting in 1996, a couple of key changes were made to the PWM apply strategy, so that triggered changes in the pump assembly again. They also introduced the second design 3-2 control solenoid and 3-2 control valve. So they went to a kind of a simpler valve and spring setup. In the 93 through 95, the 3-2 control valve was steel, and they used a dual spring setup. In 96 and up, they went to a different 3-2 control solenoid and an anodized aluminum valve with a different spring. Now, the impedance for the 3-2 control solenoid from 93 through 95 was between 9 and 11 ohms. That was the continuity for those years. In 96 and up, they changed that to align with the impedance for the 2-shift solenoids, and that impedance or resistance value is going to be between somewhere 19 to 23 ohms. So if you need to replace your 3-2 control solenoid 1993 through 1995, and you go to your part supplier, they're going to sell you a 96 and up PWM solenoid. Okay, a solenoid is a solenoid, but it needs to match the resistance value and the value in which it functions, if you will, so that these earlier year PCMs will recognize that solenoid and not throw some kind of trouble code or put the transmission into limp mode. Okay, so that's how you can adapt a 95 or even a 96 and 97, or in theory up to 2000, into a 93 or 94. And you can adapt a 96 to 2000 to work with a 95. And again, you're changing the same kinds of things. Valve body, spacer plate, and in the case of these 96 to 97 units, the pump, and that's it for 95, and same for 93, 94. Okay, now for 98 through early 2006, okay, some more major changes were introduced. So 1998 was the first year, actually technically 97 in the Corvettes, but 98 in the F-body cars was the first year of the 4L60Es with the 300 millimeter design input shaft and TMBX converter, and these were all designed to work with the Gen 3 small blocks, so your LS1s, and then later the 4.8s, 5.3s, and 6 liters, 6.2s, and all the other LSX family engines. So in 97 with the Vets, those transmissions are a little different, so that's why I'm kind of treating them a little differently. But if you had a 96 model year vehicle and you wanted to adapt a 98 or through 2000 F-body transmission to work in a 96 truck application, for example, you can do that. All you would need to do is change out the drum, the pump, and you would need to install the correct converter. Okay, the wiring harness didn't change, the valve body didn't change, the plate's the same. So those are the three things you would have to do. Okay, so 1996 through 2000, for most of your passenger car and truck applications, you're going to take the Vortec Gen 1 small block Chevys, so you have their 298 millimeter input shaft and corresponding pump stator design. In 98, they introduced, for all other platforms beyond the Corvette, the 300 millimeter style input shaft and TMBX converters and corresponding stators for the Gen 3 small blocks, specifically the LS1s. Okay, they were the first. And then in 2001, they started to migrate to the Gen 3 small block truck engines, and therefore you saw the introduction of the 300 millimeter style 4L60Es into those vehicles. All right, so the next vintage consists of 2006 late through 2008. And the defining characteristic for these years is the introduction of the input speed sensor or turbine speed sensor that was installed into the back of the pump that read a little reluctor gear cast into the input shaft. Okay. Additionally, they introduced the bonded separator plates at this time with the factory. In the past, the plates would be just, the metal plate, and then you'd have the gaskets separate. Starting in either late 2006 or 2007, they began to introduce these bonded style spacer plates that had the gaskets adhered to the plate itself, and that's how it came. You could not separate the gaskets from the spacer plate without ruining it. So, and the plates also had integrated filter screens, whereas the previous design plates took a separate filter screen for the EPC and the shift solenoids. So any late 2006 up to 2008 will retro into any year that took a Gen 3 small block 4L60E. So in other words, the 300 millimeter input shaft design and TMBX converter without any adaptation. Okay. These earlier years that don't take the input speed sensor, the speed sensor will just simply be non-functioning. The computers and ECMs in those vehicles are not going to be looking for it. So if you have a bad 96, you can take a 2008 model year transmission and retro into it, but you have to do further adaptation because you have to swap the input shaft, the pump, and the converter. But if you had, say, an 01 Tahoe and had a 5.3 in it, and you had an 08 and you had a good deal on it, you can put that in there and it'd be fine. Okay, there's some interior changes to the transmission, but they're not material when it comes to having it function and work and communicate with the PCM in these earlier years, because those older PCMs are not going to be looking for a speed sensor. They don't care. All right, starting in 2009 is where we had our major changes. Okay, 2009 through 2013 were the last 4 years of the life cycle, and nothing about these transmissions as a whole unit will retro back to any prior years, like I mentioned earlier. Okay, first year of the internal mode switch that replaced the manual lever position sensor and pressure switch manifold assembly. They also eliminated the 3-2 control solenoid and 3-2 control valve and spring in the valve body, so those valve bodies are completely different in terms of their design, their structure, and everything. Nothing will retro. So if you have a 2010 or 2011 model year vehicle with a 4L60E, it goes bad, you want to stick to 2009 to 2013 only. All right. So when it comes to spacer plates, Transgo makes vintage specific plates that will work with any year 700R4 and 4L60E. Okay, so for example, the 4696 plate of theirs will work with all years 1996 through 2006. They have a separate one for 2007, 2008, and then a 2009 to 2013. They also have a standalone plate for 1995 and a plate that will work for 93, 94. So if your plate is damaged or no good, or you're just missing a plate and you need one, just purchase the Transgo plate. They're usually like 20 to 30 bucks. And they'll give you all the instructions you need to install it, and you'll be good to go as long as you buy the right plate for your application in vintage. All right, we talked about the adaptation. When I say adaptation, that's what I mean. You're swapping parts basically to make things work with the architecture of whatever engine family that your vehicle has. So Gen 1 or Gen 2, in the case of F-bodies, you had your LT1s and LT4s. Then you had your Gen 3 small blocks and Gen 4 small blocks. So the Corvettes made, the ZR1s made, and I want to say 1991 or 92 through 1995, had that LT5. It was that dual overhead cam V8 that was actually designed by Lotus jointly with GM and manufactured, I believe, by Mercury Marine out of Oklahoma. that was a wholly unique engine that, you know, it wasn't around for very long. I don't even know if I have my years correct. 95 or 96, you know, somewhere in there was the last years, I believe. An overwhelming majority of Corvettes did not receive that engine. It was installed, as far as I know, just exclusively in the ZR1s of that vintage. So I don't even know if they even took an automatic transmission. I think they actually only had the ZF manuals installed, the ZF 6-speeds. So I don't think that that would even apply when it comes to either a 4L60 or a 4L80. It you know, popped into my head, so I figured I would discuss it. Okay, that is the video. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them below. If there's anything else you want me to cover as it relates to 4L60Es, just go ahead and notate it in the comments, and I'll do what I can to prioritize making a video for you. And as far as 4L60E vintages go, I may even make this segment a standalone video, because I know that there is everybody and their mother is always asking about interchange and will this work with that, or I have this model, you know, year vehicle, and I need a transmission and I got a line on another one, but it's out of a different year or a different, you know, make and model or whatever, submodel. Will it work? This should help clear up a lot of that confusion and uncertainty, so folks out there that are just trying to swap transmissions, they know what will work and what won't, you know, holistically. So, all right, thank you again for watching. Can't thank you enough for all of your viewership and everything, all the support. I greatly appreciate it. Until the next time we meet, enjoy the rest of your day or evening, and I look forward to seeing you on my next video. Thank you.